Beneath the veil of civilization, behind the polished smiles and scripted ambitions of men and women alike, there lies a whisper, a primal call that refuses to be silenced. It is not reason, it is not virtue, it is something more ancient, more unruly, and more unsettling. It is the will. Arthur Schopenhauer, the German philosopher often cloaked in darkness, dared to speak of what most men refuse to acknowledge, that at the root of our desires, behind every romance, every lust, every boredom, and every regret, lurks a blind, irrational force, a force that drives the universe and enslaves the human soul, the will to life. In a world that glorifies romantic love and sensual pleasure, Schopenhauer cuts through the illusion with surgical precision. He tells us that sex, the most intimate act between humans, is not an expression of love, but a cunning deception of nature. That boredom, the silent plague of modern existence, is not a symptom of laziness but the proof that existence itself has no purpose but continuation. We chase pleasure, we fear boredom, we fall in love. But beneath it all, we are prisoners of the will, ensnared in a cycle we did not choose and cannot escape. What if everything we consider sacred is merely the will using us as instruments of its perpetuation? This is not merely a question of philosophy. It is a confrontation with the very essence of what it means to live, to desire, to suffer. This is Schopenhauer's gift and his curse. Today, we walk through his mind. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that at the core of all reality lies the will, an invisible, unconscious force that surges through everything. It is not a personal will. It is not a rational will. It is a blind, aimless, ceaseless striving, a perpetual unrest embedded in the heart of existence. From the budding of a flower to the mating rituals of insects, from the ambition of a king to the hunger of a beggar, this will manifests itself in every action, every breath, every tear. It has no morality, it has no purpose. It merely wants but never knows why. This is the tragic insight. Humans, unlike animals, are aware of this will within them. They can reflect, they can reason, and yet they remain its slaves. They chase goals, wealth, sex, status, not because they freely choose them, but because the will compels them. And once attained, satisfaction is fleeting. The will, never full, hungers again. In Schopenhauer's words, our willing arises from want, from deficiency, and therefore from suffering. Fulfillment ends the pain, but soon brings boredom. Thus, the will condemns us to a pendulum swing between pain and boredom, between longing and indifference, between desire and the cold silence that follows. And in this dance, sex plays the cruelest trick of all. Modern culture wraps sex in the language of love, connection, even spiritual fulfillment. But for Schopenhauer, this is all delusion. Sex, he argued, is not about love. It is about reproduction. And reproduction is not about us. It is about the will perpetuating itself. We believe we choose our partners freely, but Schopenhauer insists this is an illusion. What attracts us is not rational compatibility, but genetic advantage. The body seeks what the mind does not understand, and the will orchestrates everything behind the scenes. Why is sexual desire so intense? Why does it overwhelm reason, destroy reputations, start wars, and inspire poetry? Because, Schopenhauer says, the will to life hides itself in the mask of passion. The orgasm is not the climax of love. It is the silent command of nature forcing us to obey its law. The sexual impulse is the most complete manifestation of the will to live, its most plainly expressed type. And once nature has had its way, once the child is conceived, the passion vanishes, love fades, interest dies, the veil lifts, and boredom returns. We were never in control. The will used us, then abandoned us. If sex is the trick of the will, boredom is the cruel reminder of its aimlessness. To Schopenhauer, boredom is not a trivial inconvenience. It is a metaphysical signal, evidence that life lacks intrinsic meaning. If our will is not immediately engaged, if desire is momentarily silent, we feel empty. Time stretches. Existence itself becomes unbearable. Why do we need constant stimulation? Why do we drown ourselves in distractions, relationships, entertainment, even suffering? Because without striving, we are face to face with the absurdity of existence. Boredom unmasks the truth that beyond our cravings, life has nothing to offer. Human life must be some kind of mistake. This statement is not a cynical joke. It is a philosophical thunderclap. If the will only seeks but never finds peace, then all our pursuits are doomed from the start. And yet, there is something empowering in this darkness. If the will enslaves, might we also learn to resist? Schopenhauer was no nihilist. He did not simply declare life meaningless and retreat into despair. Instead, he sought transcendence, not through pleasure, but through renunciation. He believed that the noblest path was the denial of the will, to stop striving, to turn inward, to embrace asceticism, This, he claimed, is the way to rise above suffering. Art, music, philosophy, they momentarily silence the will. In contemplation, the individual forgets their desires and becomes a pure observer of beauty. But it is fleeting. The true liberation comes when one renounces desire altogether, not in hatred of life, but in quiet understanding of its chains. In this, Schopenhauer echoes the wisdom of the East, of Buddhism, of the Upanishads. He admired those sages who withdrew from the world, not because they were weak, but because they saw the truth. The man who has attained to a denial of the will to live recognizes himself no longer as an individual, but as the eternal essence of the world. This is not death, but awakening. In modernity, love is often treated as sacred, even redemptive. It is the plotline of every film, the fuel of poetry, the hope of generations. But Schopenhauer disenchants it. He reduces romantic love to a tool of the species, a veil cast over lust to make reproduction feel divine. He asks us, have you noticed how irrational love often is? How we are drawn to those who may be ill, suited for us in every rational sense, yet irresistible to our passions. This is the will selecting mates not for individual happiness, but for genetic balance. The curve of the hips, the strength of the jaw, the scent of skin. It is not affection, it is biology. The love of man and woman is the trick which the species plays on the individual for its own ends. Thus, heartbreak is not just emotional pain. It is the will's fury when its goals are obstructed. And the tragedy, even those who achieve love find it fades. What once thrilled becomes ordinary. Desire burns, and then it is ash, because the will has already moved on to the next hunger. Schopenhauer paints a bleak canvas, but it is not without purpose. He wants us to see, to strip away illusions, to look directly at the suffering sewn into the fabric of existence. He reminds us that animals suffer too, but without reflection. Humans suffer consciously, and that makes it worse. We know we're suffering, we wonder why, we hope for relief. And hope, Schopenhauer warns, is often just the postponement of despair. This is not a call to hedonism, nor is it a license for depression. It is a wake-up call. Stop expecting the world to satisfy you. It cannot. It was not made for that. The will did not design life for joy, but for continuation. If you live seeking happiness, you will suffer. But if you live seeking truth, you may be free. Among the few paths that offer temporary escape from the tyranny of the will, Schopenhauer places art in a sacred realm. To create or to truly behold art is to become momentarily free from desire. The artist does not seek advantage, conquest, or reproduction. He does not chase pleasure or escape pain. He observes, and in that observation the will is silenced. Whether through painting, music, poetry, or philosophy, the artist turns his gaze away from the ceaseless demands of existence and reflects on the eternal. The sight of beauty leads us from the individual to the universal. Art lifts the mind above its personal cravings and into a higher plane. When we stand before a sculpture, lost in its silent expression, or sink into a sonata that seems to stop time, we become detached. The self dissolves. The will forgets to hunger. But it is fleeting. The moment passes, and the will returns, thirsty, demanding, relentless. Yet those brief moments remind us that there is something more than just striving. There is a state of being beyond the grasping hands of the will. And in that glimpse lies hope. Schopenhauer did not see sexuality as merely one desire among many. He saw it as the desire, the most potent manifestation of the will. Every social norm, every custom, every hierarchy, in some way or another, revolves around it. It rules relationships, ambition, even war. Civilizations rise and fall under its invisible hand. Sexual desire, he wrote, is the goal of nearly all human effort. And yet, the satisfaction it brings is so brief it borders on absurdity. A single act, a moment's climax, and then what? Silence, disgust, a return to yearning, or worse, guilt. The philosopher speaks without apology. The post-coital feeling is one of revulsion and self-disgust. The will has spoken, and the individual realizes he was merely a puppet. If you observe closely, you will see this pattern everywhere. Lovers who grow distant, husbands and wives estranged. The pursuit, not the possession, is what intoxicates us. The will is never satisfied. It only whispers louder. When the sexual act fulfills its hidden aim, conception, the will celebrates its victory. A new life is born. But the child is not a gift, not truly. It is a continuation, a replication of the will's cycle through another vessel. To Schopenhauer, procreation is not sacred. It is tragic. For to be born is to suffer, to exist is to struggle, and to bring another into existence is to cast them into the same fire we ourselves could not escape. He did not advocate cruelty, but clarity. If children came into the world by an act of pure reason, would the human race continue to exist? The philosopher's question is sharp and cold, but it is not meant to be cruel. It is meant to awaken. What are we doing when we create life? Are we fulfilling love's promise, or are we blindly obeying a biological command that cares nothing for the individual? The child does not ask to be born, and yet it inherits all the burdens of the will: hunger, desire, ambition, anxiety, and death. In Schopenhauer's day, boredom was already a torment. But in our modern age, it has evolved into a kind of spiritual rot. We live in a world saturated with distractions. Phones, noise, news, pleasures at every turn, and yet boredom has not disappeared. It has only gone underground. We are not less bored, we are more terrified of stillness. To sit in silence, to be without stimulation, is unbearable to the modern soul. Why? Because without noise, the will becomes audible. It stirs beneath the skin. It asks questions we cannot answer. Why are you alive? What do you want? What is the point? Schopenhauer would say this is not a psychological flaw, but a metaphysical truth. We are not empty because something is missing. We are empty because the will is emptiness. It never rests, and it never satisfies. Only when we cease to obey it can peace begin. Beauty is often equated with desire. But Schopenhauer flips this on its head. True beauty, he says, is that which stills desire. When you look at a mountain at sunset, you do not wish to conquer it. You simply behold it. When you hear a melody that lifts your soul, you do not seek to possess it. You let it move through you. This, he says, is the purest form of perception. Aesthetic contemplation is the momentary deliverance from the will. To see beauty without lust, to experience something without wanting it, that is the Schopenhauerian gaze. It is rare, but when it occurs, it breaks the cycle. The will forgets itself, and for a moment, you become more than a desiring creature. You become a witness of the eternal. This is why art matters, not for entertainment, not for status, but because it teaches the soul how to be still. Despite his bleak metaphysics, Schopenhauer was not without moral grounding. In fact, he placed compassion at the heart of all true ethics. If life is suffering, then to ease another's suffering is the highest act. Not out of virtue, signaling, not out of religion, but from a shared recognition that we all bear the same burden. To harm another is to affirm the will. To help another is to resist it. In a world driven by competition, sexuality, and ambition, Schopenhauer's ethics call us back to stillness, to empathy, to silence. When you see the suffering of others not as an annoyance, but as your own, you become free, if only for a moment. Compassion is the basis of morality. True love, in this light, is not desire. It is shared understanding, not passion but presence. What does death mean in a world ruled by the will? To Schopenhauer, death is not the enemy. It is not the terror we imagine. It is the silencing of the will in its individual form. It is the end of striving, of craving, of illusion. He does not speak of heaven or hell, only of release. For when the will no longer needs the body, the suffering ends. Death is the great opportunity, no longer to be I. But until that moment, we must endure. And in that endurance lies a choice to live blindly under the will's command, or to begin, even now, to untangle ourselves from its grip. Schopenhauer admired three figures above all: the monk who renounces, the philosopher who sees, and the artist who reveals. Each in their own way confronts the will. The monk withdraws from the world, not out of fear, but from wisdom. He denies pleasure, not because he hates life, but because he has seen its chains. The philosopher endures suffering, but makes sense of it. He transforms agony into clarity. The artist captures fleeting moments of freedom and shares them, so others might also taste liberation. These are not glamorous lives, but they are real, and in their stillness they hold more truth than all the noise of the world. What then shall we do? We live in a world that celebrates pleasure, idolizes love, and fears silence. But Schopenhauer offers us an alternative: not despair, but discipline; not resignation, but reflection. To live wisely is not to obey every desire, but to understand it, to see the will behind every thought, every passion, every boredom, and smile at its predictability. This is not a rejection of life. It is the beginning of true life. A life not controlled by invisible forces, but aware of them. A life capable of stillness, of empathy, of clarity. It takes courage to look life in the face and not flinch, to see desire as deception, to see love as the tool of nature, to see boredom as proof of emptiness. But in doing so, we become something greater than servants of the will. We become seers, witnesses, quiet warriors of understanding. Schopenhauer does not tell us to run. He asks us to awaken. To suffer is to be human, but to reflect on that suffering, to find within it the roots of compassion, the seeds of freedom, is to become something more, So ask yourself not how to be happy, but how to be awake. Not how to escape boredom, but how to see through it. Not how to possess love, but how to understand it. And in that questioning, you may discover the stillness you've always sought. If you've walked this far through Schopenhauer's mind, then you've taken a rare journey. A journey not of answers, but of deeper questions. If this stirred something within you, something beyond entertainment, then subscribe not just to this channel, but to your own deeper awareness. Share your thoughts, not for likes, but for reflection. Let the comment section be a quiet garden of contemplation. And remember, the will may drive the world, but awareness sets you free. Until next time, stay still, stay watchful, and stay human.